father, so that's not too bad. And our first session, of course, is on birth and development of the Republic. And I'm just going to say two extremely brief things to start with. And we're not probably going to discuss the birth in a historical sense, but I think always a mistake to somehow assume, as sometimes is done, of course, that Cyprus was doomed as a state, doomed as a society from 1960 onwards by the very nature of what happened in 1960. Wrong, I think. Many states, I think, had independent settlements that were also fettered, also broken in some sense. So perhaps we shouldn't start out with too much of a doomsdayerism about the prospects of the Cypriot state, the Cypriot society, at the point of independence. We may come back to that. So not doomed, I think, at birth. The other thing I wanted to say was about the rhetoric of Archbishop Macarius in 1959-1960, which was so much about Cyprus's future as a golden bridge. That was always at the heart of what the Archbishop said, it seems to me. And that vision of Cyprus as a golden bridge still seems to me the best way of articulating what the opportunities and what the achievements of Cyprus can be and have been. And because I want to say that, of course, I'm interested that Mr. Stefan, who picked up on exactly, I think, that kind of language and that kind of metaphor in what he said. And of course, the golden bridge isn't only to be defined in political terms, but in other terms, and that's what our session is now, isn't it? It's about Cyprus as not just a political country, but about an artistic country, an educational country, so many themes in which I think Cyprus has been very successful since 1960. And so let's move into this medley of themes that we have. We're going to start with Dr. Klearchos Kyriakides, who's a senior lecturer at the University of Hertfordshire, who's a lawyer, but also a military man, and is going to pick up on the strategic issues in the relationship between Cyprus, Britain, and the other services. So Klearchos has 6 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Professor Holland. Can I first of all begin by thanking the organisers for their kind invitation to me and for all of their hard work in relation to the organisation of this conference. I've circulated a copy of my paper. If anybody doesn't have it, I do have a few spare here which I can give to them a bit later on. I'd like to begin by taking us back to 1960, because back then the United Kingdom was the colonial power, at least until August of that year. And the United Kingdom was led by a gentleman called Harold Macmillan, the then Prime Minister. He was famous for proclaiming that the British people, or most of them, have never had it so good. That was a reflection of the affluence that was then prevailing in the United Kingdom. What's the position today? Well, according to a recent front cover of the satirical magazine Private Eye, the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who's also a Conservative, David Cameron, has warned the British people that you've never had it so bad. That juxtaposition between the apparent affluence of 1960 and the apparent, if near bankruptcy of today, forms the backdrop to my paper. When I received the invitation to address you today, I was very pleased to see the title, Cyprus, 50 Years of Independence, Achievements and Challenges. Regrettably, in view of the Turkish invasion and occupation and the troubled history of the island, that so-called Cyprus question has acted as a suffocating influence upon academic, political, diplomatic and day-to-day discourse in relation to the Cyprus question. And it's had the effect of making us academics and others just focus on the Cyprus question and overlook the achievements of the Republic of Cyprus. And my central argument in this paper and in my brief contribution today is to advance the following argument. One of the major achievements of the Republic of Cyprus has been, whether they wanted it or not is another matter, but one of the great achievements of the Republic of Cyprus has been to contribute to the defence, expeditionary strategy and national security of this country, the United Kingdom. This is an overlooked point. Politicians don't like mentioning it, but it's an achievement that the Republic of Cyprus should take credit for, and in my view should try to seek some political and diplomatic dividends. What do I do in the paper? Well, what I do in the paper is I advance 5 propositions which are connected to that central argument. And I'm just going to outline these propositions. You can read the details in the paper. My first proposition is that a taboo seems to exist in relation to the British military infrastructure on the island of Cyprus, which encompasses the Republic, including the occupied areas, and the 2 adjacent sovereign base areas. The taboo exists in official circles in the Republic, in my view, and it also exists here in the United Kingdom. In 2006, the Republic of Cyprus and the port of Limassol in particular were instrumental in support of the evacuation of British and other nationals from Lebanon, which at the time was gripped by crisis. The Prime Minister of this country acknowledged the assistance provided to British citizens by Her Majesty's forces. This was in a parliamentary debate. But he said nothing about the contribution of the Republic of Cyprus. Other ministers, in Parliament at least, have been likewise silent in relation to the role of Cyprus in support of the Lebanon crisis of 2006. That, according to the media here, was the largest evacuation of British people since Dunkirk back in 1940. So that's my first proposition. There's a taboo. My second proposition is that the Republic of Cyprus and the United Kingdom have enjoyed a special, if unequal, relationship, particularly in the field of defence. And one only needs to look at the treaty framework from 1960 to understand the uniqueness of the bilateral relationship. If you just look back on the last 50 years, the Republic and the SBAs have been instrumental in support of a host of operations. I'll just single out a few. Kuwait, 1961. Kuwait again in 1991. Afghanistan since 2001. Iraq since 2003. And Lebanon on various occasions, including 2006. That's an achievement that should be acclaimed by this country, and it should be acknowledged by others too. My third proposition is that British policy towards the Republic of Cyprus since 1960 has been un-British. British policy has been ungentlemanly. British policy has been unethical. And regrettably, the United Kingdom has on the one hand sought to derive the benefits associated with the 1960 framework without honouring its fundamental guarantee as set out in the 1960 Treaty of Guarantee. So my third proposition is that British policy has been un-British, and perhaps looking to the future it can be transformed in a more sensible direction, and the new coalition government may hopefully adopt such an approach. My next fourth and penultimate proposition is that the British military infrastructure on the island may be entering a precarious new era on account of the depleted state of the public finances here in the United Kingdom and the Strategic Defence and Security Review, which was unveiled by the new Secretary of State for Defence, Dr. Fox. Speculation is rife that the military base at Digelia, within the eastern sovereign base area, may be closed down, or at the very least downgraded. Well, I can imagine the closure of Digelia, or any proposed surrender of Digelia, turning into yet another apple of discord in the barrel of the Cyprus question. So what I've done in my paper is I've advanced a novel idea. If the outcome of the Strategic Defence Review is that Digelia should be dismantled, instead of putting a padlock on it, or turning it into yet another bone of contention, why not turn Digelia into what I call a Commonwealth EU centre dedicated to the promotion of education, perhaps by the establishment of a university, the protection of the environment, and, to borrow the phrase cited earlier by Rob Holland, the creation of a golden bridge between the Commonwealth and the European Union. And this will require money, but some Commonwealth states, India springs to mind, seem to have a lot of money. Many EU states, Greece and the UK spring to mind, have next to no money. Why not use that military base for good effect? So that, ladies and gentlemen, is my paper and my contribution to this seminar. I wanted to just conclude with the following thought. The year 2010 not only marks the 50th anniversary of the Republic of Cyprus, but also the golden wedding anniversary, which I've put in inverted commas, of what may be described as the forced marriage between the Republic of Cyprus and Her Majesty's forces. Time will tell whether the marriage endures for another 50 years, and if so, on what basis. However, if the current defence review necessitates the closure of the military base at Vigeia, then this ought to result in the conception of what I've described as a Commonwealth EU centre, or Golden Bridge. One can only hope that if such a centre is established, it would become a child of which both parents could be justifiably proud. Thank you.
Thank you, Klearchos. So, let's move on. Well, Cyprus has certainly been a bridge, has it not, between Eastern and Western art, and in the years of the emergency, I think probably the heyday of Cypriot art. But we're going to have Mary Plant to tell us about how that worked out, I think, in the 50 years after independence. Mary is Famagusta born, UK-based for 30 years, now Nicosia-based, and there's nobody better to tell us about post-independence artistic life in Cyprus and its achievements. Thank you.
You just show some slides. Do I have to go over there?
I could put, you tell me when to press on that.
Huh?
If you tell me when
I'll have to point. Yeah. Okay. Yes, anyway, before I start my talk, I would like to say that this talk is heavily indebted to a text given to me by Dr. Eleni Nikita, who for many years was the head of the cultural services in Cyprus. When Cyprus became independent in 1960, there was barely an art scene in existence, and not much in the way of literary publications or the other arts. The years of occupation did not provide a climate for nurturing the arts. The Cypriots are a creative people, and through their history have produced beautiful crafts, music, religious icons, and the remarkable folk poets. However, not having the means to travel or a higher education, most people lived in ignorance as to the development in the arts with capital A in the rest of the world. Very few privileged persons were able to go abroad to study at a university or to visit the museums and galleries. Nevertheless, remarkable people born towards the end of the 19th century did exist, people who wrote and produced art. One such person was Yiannis, born in 1889, that's his picture there, who had gone to Greece to study medicine to change later to art. He returned to Cyprus in 1916, where he taught drawing and painted Cypriot scenes. Disillusioned, he and his family emigrated to South Africa. Another example is Nikos Nikolaidis, born in 1884, a painter and writer who lived in Greece and Egypt for many years before deciding to return home in 1919, intending to turn Cyprus into the land of the muses. 4 years later, he left Cyprus to live in Egypt, feeling that his work was not appreciated on the island. Another artist, Lucia Nicolaidou, born in 1909, was the first woman from Cyprus to study art. She studied in Paris and had her first exhibition in 1993 in Limassol. Disillusioned with the lack of response, she left for London in 1937. During the first part of the 20th century, the two Cypriots were considered the fathers of art in Cyprus, went abroad to study art. These are artists Adamantios Diamandis and Telemachos Kantos. The artist George Poliodiou, born in 1901, studied law but was very much aware of the new trends in art through his time abroad. These artists painted mainly local scenes and also produced work highlighting the struggle for independence from the British occupation in 1955 to 59. With independence, the big changes on the island also affected the world of art. According to the new constitution, education, culture and religion were not controlled by the government, but by departments for intellectual and cultural development, one each for the Greek and Turkish Cypriot communities. Due to the intercommunal troubles that began in 1963 and the departure of the Turkish Cypriots from the government, the community cultural departments were dissolved, and in 1965, the Ministry of Education and Cultural Services was created in order to promote the island's culture at home and abroad. During this time, countries began establishing embassies on the island and through their cultural sections promoted their own artists, thus bringing the new trends in art to Cyprus. Also, more and more Cypriots went abroad to study art, bringing back all the new ideas. The cultural services created opportunities for Cypriot artists to exhibit abroad, and the first Biennale that Cypriots took part in was in Alexandria in 1963. The President, Archbishop Makarios, realizing the importance of promoting art and culture in general, appointed Tony Spiteri, the then Secretary of the International Association of Art Critics, as Cultural Counselor to the Republic of Cyprus. Tony Spiteri was instrumental in promoting the new generation of artists and giving them opportunities to exhibit outside Cyprus. An important figure in the artistic world of Cyprus who had broken with the tradition of academic art is Christoforos Sava, born 1924. Sava, who studied in London and Paris, experimented with various materials and dared in that time of traditions to add pins, sand, wood, etc. to his work, and also to produce abstract compositions. With his friend, artist and critic Glyn Hughes, born 1931, they started the Gallery Apophasis, which became a center for artists, writers and other creative people. At this gallery in 1961, there was the first exhibition of Turkish and Greek Cypriot artists who showed together in the newly established Cypriot state. Development and experimentation in art continued, with many artists embracing abstract art and following all the trends in Europe and elsewhere. The artists are too many to mention them all, but key figures in these exciting times are sculptor Andreas Savidis, painter Stelios Votsis, Andreas Chrysochos, and artist Nikos Kourousis. It is worth mentioning that many were now joined by women artists such as Keti Stefanidou and Vera Gavrilidou Hachida, born in the 20s and 30s. Conceptual art was introduced by Angelos Makridis and George Strikas. The artist Stas Paraskos, whose picture you see, born 1933, who lived and taught art in England, organized the first summer school in Famagusta in 1969, bringing to the island students and artists such as Laurie Burt and Terry Frost, and encouraged Cypriots to join them free of charge. Those summer schools that later moved to Paphos were very exciting places where artists met, worked and exchanged ideas. The school has now grown into a full-time art college and is based in Lemba and Larnaca. All this artistic euphoria, along with everything else, came to a terrible end in July 1974 with the Greek junta coup and the Turkish invasion of Cyprus. With many dead and 200,000 refugees and 37% of the island occupied by the Turkish army, the effort of the Cyprus government turned towards survival and the need to house and feed the dispossessed. There were no budgets for art. After the initial shock, artists felt the need to create work condemning what had happened to their island, and a strong need arose to hold onto and to emphasize their cultural identity. In 1978, that's 4 years after the invasion, the Cultural Services in Nicosia organized the first Pan-Cyprian exhibition since 1974. The exhibition was to honor the memory of Makarios and was called The Ethna of Makarios and the Struggles of the Cypriot People. Despite the new political situation in Cyprus, the economy began to recover, and the dream of a political solution and the refugees' dream of returning home kept people optimistic and creative. In the 80s, more artists returned to the island after their studies, and the art scene began to flourish again. The awareness of the reality of the political situation caused several artists to rethink and to produce work that could be used as ambassadors for the cause of Cyprus when exhibiting abroad. By now, the new artists' work had become quite sophisticated and the message is more subtle. These artists include Christos Foukaras, Glafkos Koumidis, Angelos Makridis, Hambis, Theodulos Grigoriou, Mary Plant, and Maria Loizidou, and many more. I cannot name them all. This new sophistication brought Cypriot art in line with Europe and the rest of the world, and work produced by Cypriot artists became more and more international. Thus, by the time Cyprus joined the European Union in 2004, the art scene in Cyprus was practically indistinguishable from anywhere else. The younger artists were now using the new technology, producing videos, installations, and generally postmodern work. These new artists are impossible to name in such a short paper, which set out to give a glimpse of the history of Cyprus art during the last 50 years. The work can be viewed, though, in Cyprus and often abroad. In 2003, due to the partial easing of communication between Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots on the island and the opening of one of the checkpoints, artists from both communities began to meet and several intercommunal exhibitions were organized. Turkish Cypriot artists began to be part of large exhibitions such as accidental meetings at the Powerhouse in Nicosia, and also to exhibit at the Greek Cypriot commercial galleries. In 2007, Cyprus was represented at the Venice Biennale by the work of a Greek Cypriot and the Turkish Cypriot artists, Haris Epaminonda and Mustafa Koulousi. This kind of communication is also taking place in many other fields and will hopefully ease the way to the reunification of the island with free movement and access to one's heritage and private property. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. If we could have excursions to go with this conference, we will now go to the State Gallery in Nicosia. I'm always amazed how few Nicosians ever go to the State Gallery. It's quite lovely, and if you haven't been, you could see Mary's paper in some summary in that very, very nice gallery. We're going to move on to somebody who actually is a bridge, because Mr. Kyriacos Tsioupras is a bridge between Cypriot and British print media. He's worked for so long both in Cyprus and in British media that, as I say, he epitomises so much about it. So let me hand over to him on the
Thank you,
media.
Robert. My subject, of course, as Robert said, is British media and the Cyprus issue. During the 50 years period since independence, having followed rather closely the British media and more so the British press, I can distinguish in very general terms, of course, 4 phases regarding their stance on the Cyprus issue. The first one from 1960 to the coup inspired by the Greek junta and the Turkish invasion in 1974. The second from the time of the coup and the Turkish invasion to the illegal unilateral declaration of independence by Raouf Denktash in 1983. The third from UDI to the referendums on the UN peace plan named after the then UN Secretary General Kofi Annan in April 2004, and the fourth one from 2004 to today. During the first phase, from 1960 to the coup and the Turkish invasion, British media gave full support to the Declaration of Independence, understandably so, because the Zurich Agreement safeguarded in the best possible way for the British side the military bases and other British interests. During the second phase, between the invasion and the UDI, the media tried to maintain a misconceived balance between the illegality of the coup and the atrocity of the invasion, and had nothing effective to say against the occupation, even less to advise action against it. In the third phase, between UDI and the Annan plan, the media were explicitly against Denktaş's action, foreseeing the imminent danger towards the overturn of the Zurich Agreement, which provided for the BC, that's the British sovereign areas, and other vital British interests. I do remember a leading article in the Times advising for the use of brutal force, I never saw such a term on any other occasion, against the Denktaş regime. In the fourth phase, after April 2004, the media came out severely criticizing the Greek Cypriot side for using their democratic right of voting against the plan. They portrayed the issue as a case of complete lack of trust that should be dealt with in a decisive way. The method they used was that of undermining the sovereignty of the Cyprus Republic to a point of pressurizing the Greek Cypriot side into accepting a new deal. After April 2004, only government statements and the BBC would use the term Cyprus government, the term used in most cases by the press was and is Greek Cypriot government, or words to that effect. Even with the new peace initiative of 2008 leading to the talks between President Christofias and the Turkish Cypriot leader Mehmet Ali Talat, and continuing now with Mr. Dervish Eroglu, which was welcomed by all sides, the British press continued with the same attitude. It is very difficult to overestimate the effectiveness of this terminology campaign. The ordinary man in the street does not go into UN resolutions, of course, or government documents to get his information. He forms his opinions on the basis of what he reads in the papers every day. All of you will know that if you are asked where you come from, and you say Cyprus, in more cases than not, you will be asked back Greek or Turkish. With Turkey's European Union entry negotiations coming more and more to the forefront of international agenda, the British press gives only secondary importance to the Cyprus issue, ignoring even those principles constituting a precondition for the entry of Turkey itself. A number of articles published recently propagated what was presented as a magic formula of overcoming the impasse on Cyprus. Turkey to open its ports to the Cyprus Republic in exchange for the direct trade with the occupied part, knowing, of course, that the first is a legal obligation of Turkey as an applicant country, and the second will open the way for the recognition of the illegal state. But that is not all. With Turkey's new assertiveness as a leading regional power, aspiring for a world role, the Cyprus issue for the British media is removed from the picture completely, not on every case, but very, very often. A leader in The Guardian, and that's The Guardian, by the way, on February the 5th, on the Israeli attack against the flotilla sailing to Gaza, ended with the words, "Turkey is changing. It has many cards in its hands. The rest of the world should work with those changes." Any reader who didn't know wouldn't even imagine, by reading the article, that that country is actually occupying more than 1/3 of another country, member of the European Union. Another article in the Financial Times, also at the beginning of June, quotes the Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, describing the Israeli attack on the Turkish port as state terrorism contrary to international law, which of course it was. But wouldn't that fit exactly to what Turkey did to Cyprus, only multiplied, of course, by many, many more times? Yet there was nothing about Cyprus in that article. We are still looking for words to describe this attitude. Thank you.
So I'm told our voices aren't carrying to this side of the room, so we'll have to raise our voices a little bit. We're moving on to the theme of education, to tourism, which of course is so central to the economic life of the island. And we've lost one of our speakers, so we're moving straight on to Yiannis Efthemiou and Andreas Ekkeshis, who will speak quite briefly, 3 or 4 minutes is what we need. A couple of minutes.
Yes, I haven't prepared the paper because I was asked only by the other day to, let's say, a few things epigrammatically on the industries of travel and tourism, how it developed in Cyprus. With the birth of the Republic as the title of the conference today and the achievements, in the 60s, tourism and travel was in its infancy in Cyprus. when the Cyprus government set up the Cyprus Tourism Organization in 1971, that is incidentally when I started in travel myself, and with the existence already of Cyprus Airways as an airline of repute, between the UK especially and Cyprus, the tourism industry began to grow rapidly, especially in the last 30 years of the 20th century, more specifically in the last 20 years, in the 80s and the 90s. The UK historically had, because of the history, Britain was always the country, the main source for tourism to the island, and still remains today. And it peaked to mention some stats on arrivals, in the middle of this decade of the 21st century, it peaked to 2.7 million arrivals to Cyprus, and Britain was responsible for 1.4 million tourists to the island. In recent years, because of the global competition and the rapid development of other destinations, Cyprus has lost some of its arrival numbers. It grew rapidly. Tourism in Cyprus grew rapidly. What I want to say is well known that Cyprus has a mature and established tourist product. Like many destinations worldwide, it went out of fashion, 2 or 3 years ago. It's now reinventing itself. And I want to mention a point about the Cypriot specialists here in the UK who were responsible in the 70s and 80s initially to help the growth of the tourism to the island from the United Kingdom. And if it wasn't for the demise of 2 or 3 large companies like Cypriana in the 90s and Golden Sun and Libra more recently in the last decade, the tourism market would have been in the hands of Cypriots. However, I think Cyprus still remains a beautiful island, and more recently our association that I work for, ACTA, together with all the trading partners and a specific development in during this year, an agreement by the Cyprus government and the Travel Foundation, a body established in 1998 in Britain, and it's a global organization. They have signed an agreement to make Cyprus the first sustainable destination, that is to say, with responsible tourism and developing projects on the island to make sustainability issues in Cyprus. I think this arrangement over 5 years will help the island along in reinventing itself. If I can say, Cyprus is a beautiful island with many beautiful beaches. 35 of them are blue flag beaches. Even in today's, and with this arrangement, I believe Cyprus will reinvent itself and will gain back any fashion appeal that it may have lost. I hope I've given you some idea as to how Cyprus in travel and tourism works today. Thank you.
Well, Cyprus Airways has a crucial role to play. We have a representative with us. Comment.
Well, I will say very few words. I will say that when the company was born, Cyprus Airways was already 13 years old. Cyprus Airways was born in September 1947. And initially, it was the idea of a few Greek and British businessmen, and the major shareholder at the time was BEA. A lot of you will remember British European Airways before BA and BOAC joined and formed BA. And this relationship lasted until the birth of the Republic. Until then, the remaining shares were held by the British colonial government. So it was BA, the British colonial government, and a few businessmen, about 22% of the shares were held by them. When the Republic was born, the shares were transferred from the British colonial government, and Cyprus government had the majority shareholding, which still holds to date. The history of Cyprus Airways is moved in parallel with our country, and when there were good times, we both enjoyed good years, and when there were bad times, our fate, although it coincided, at the same time, Cyprus Airways helped, contributed in a very big way in helping Cyprus rise from its ashes, if you like, especially with the tragic events of 1974, when overnight Cyprus Airways became an airline without a fleet. The few aircraft we had then, one was destroyed at Nicosia Airport, and the rest remained in that zone, which was under the United Nations premise. And until February 1975, we had no airport, no fleet, and we still had, I was not with the airline then, but we had staff which had to be paid. Well, there were a lot of sacrifices. Nobody was dismissed then, but everybody had a cut in their salaries, and they helped Cyprus Airways survived. And then when in February 1975, a temporary airport was opened in Larnaca, which is now the pride of Cyprus, along with the Paphos Airport, but it was recently opened. And I will say that during all these years, Cyprus Airways started initially with 21 seaters, the Dakotas, for some of you, as some of you will remember them. And but the big expansion of Cyprus Airways came in 1985. In 1981, a decision was made to invest in a modern fleet, and that's when the all-Airbus fleet came gradually into existence. And so the 21-seater Dakota was replaced eventually by the A330s, which you all know, as they are mainly used on the route to London to Cyprus, also Paris and Amsterdam, but mainly to London, which has 295 seats, a big difference from those days. And I will say that Cyprus Airways, all these years, the national carrier of Cyprus, contributed not only in the tourism to Cyprus, but also with the cargo, the freight. And this especially when Cyprus Airways, after the events of 1974 and the catastrophe that it was subjected to, Cyprus Airways, naturally Cyprus wanted to export, they wanted to revitalize its business, and Cyprus Airways played a very big, important role then. It continues to play a very important role now, and it will continue for the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, can I make a quick observation? There's a lot of distinguished people here, and this is a rare opportunity to have them all together. There's some excellent points and major concepts presented by Dr. Kyriakides and Mr. Tsioupras. So there should be some opportunity to have some questions. At least.
We have got one more.
Otherwise,
Absolutely. We have one more contribution.
The entire session 4 is taken to discussion. So if you don't have time to discuss
But there
it
will
now,
be. There will be.
Yeah, I hope.
Even,
as long as we don't forget.
yeah.
No, indeed, I hope. So one more, and that is on education, because education has been at the heart of Cypriot life before 1960 and after 1960, and is a dynamic part of Cypriot life, of course, today. And John Charalambous is going to speak with Dr. Tozun Issa very briefly, and then we're going to have...
Indeed, very briefly,
Then we're
because I'm
going to
aware
have-
we need some discussion. So I will say two things. The Cyprus Republic inherited a divisive education system. The community chambers undertook the responsibility for education in the Greek and Cypriot communities. They produced technically excellent results. Commenting on the Republic, a remarkable success is the fact that Cyprus now is the third country in the world with graduates, following the United States and Canada. The production of so many trained people was, to my mind, absolutely fundamental to the recovery of the island after the invasion. So, in that sense, success is evident, but there is an area where the division remains, and that's something to be worried. The education on both sides, I dare say, is highly nationalistic, and this does not allow the establishment of any good relations between the communities. Attempts have been made on both sides at stages, but then they quieted down. I think we should review our approach to educate our teachers, because themselves should be in a position to educate the younger generation in a way that respects the Republic. So.
Okay.
Okay, I will say one thing within the 1.5 minutes which I've allocated to. I think the key to change in terms of creating going in the direction of reclaiming our identity, Cypriot identity, I believe goes through the process of education. I won't go into details of the actual model that I particularly would support in terms of this change, but very quickly just to say that there are different levels that this has to be done. The textual level, which is at the legal and the governmental political level. The other is the discursive, which is the involvement of every single section of the society, Cypriot society, that involves the idea of the unions, NGOs, and every single section of the community is being actively involved in the shaping of that policy. And thirdly, of course, which I think is the area that particularly interests me and the work that I do at the Center for Multilingualism at the university here, is the actual performance level, looking at the teacher training aspect, changing the training and the perception of our current teachers from both sides to focus on the Cypriot identity, looking into the language policies that will engulf the idea of bilingual practices. Here I'm distinctly talking about looking at and reclaiming Turkish and Greek as the official languages of Cyprus, and starting the bilingual programs that will start from the nursery education all the way up to tertiary and the college level. We have seen many models of this working in Europe, and there have been many successes in which the nursery education, where children start, and the research that shows that using children at that age are able to cope with, use quite comfortably, not just 2 languages and 3 languages. And the last thing that I would like to say is that on the notional identity, and the particular model of Turkish and Greek that I particularly propose in this context, is not the standard form of Turkish and Greek used, but the Cypriot varieties of Turkish and Greek, which in our view does respond and reflect the cultural identity and common elements that unites us as Cypriots. My colleagues from Turkey, and I haven't had a chance to speak to my colleagues from Greece, but certainly my colleagues from Turkey would like to differ on that perspective. But I would argue that in order to reinvent and reclaim our identity, we need to look through the language that is reflected in that. And we've seen many evidence of that within the projects that exist on both sides of the island.
Thank you very much. So we have 15 minutes if questions can be quite brief and to the point and the answers equally crisp. I mean, I think the Cyprus problem in its pure form comes late in the day, doesn't it, John? We want a question on the themes that we have discussed, so it's open to the floor. Thank you.
I hope I don't sound arrogant by jumping in first. One of the issues that Mr. Tsioupras raised, which actually links into the paper I'm presenting this afternoon, but I thought I'd better jump in before, is he made a comment at the end of his presentation by saying the incident between Israel and Turkey, the flotilla and all that, was styled by the press here in a negative way, which I totally agree with. And there wasn't a reaction or a concerted reaction by any of us here in an organized way. Now, that, to me, is one of the keys to the problem we have with what we're doing, where we are, where we're focusing our attention, and how we're progressing our struggle, if you like, the struggle for fairness, achieving an independent federal state, and the rest of it. A very small example, for example, is how the Board of Deputies, the Jewish Board of Deputies, deal with any negative publicity that's put out by the press here or in America or anywhere else. There is no way they would have allowed that kind of thing without some link or some reaction. And the point I'm making, so I don't want to go on all day, and it's a question to you, is do you not think that we have failed in Britain, in London specifically, with 300,000 Greeks and 400,000 Cypriots living here, to first organize ourselves and coordinate approaching that could easily, I mean, I put 2 or 3 letters in the mail in the Standard, not specifically on that issue, and other people have too, but that's not the way to do it. There needs to be a more organized effort, and I hope the Minister agrees with me on this, and more support from the Greek and the Cypriot government and the Turkish government to actually deal with this issue. And I think it's a huge problem that we're not organized or well enough organized to deal with. And I'll ask you to either agree or disagree with that. It's just to turn into a question.
Anyway, in a relative sense, of course, you are right. Not that we are not organized. We are organized. We are not organized up to the degree that is necessary, perhaps. And there is a lack of coordination. That I would agree with you. But to explain this phenomenon, these developments, these features in the British press, in terms of ourselves not doing enough, is like trying to put your hands to stop the rain itself. The press, well, I wouldn't try to explain to you, of course, you know very well, is the fourth power. I would say it's sometimes stronger than the other powers, yes. And the annoying thing and the disturbing thing is that they judge on the basis of power politics. They attach so much importance to Turkey now because obviously it is the country going up, rising, and they see their own interest more related to that. That doesn't mean that I don't agree with you up to a certain, of course. As I said, letters, you can send 10 letters on that same issue. Well, I wouldn't say, you wouldn't see the publication of your letter, but 99% you wouldn't see.
We're going to come back to this, I'm sure. Andrew Dismal.
Some points to press. First of all, I think one of the issues going on from the previous points is that the Cypriot community is very introspective about the question of Cyprus, the Cyprus problem. And there's huge debates and discussions within the community about all the implications of it and also engaging Turkish Cypriots. But that discussions never turned outwards to engage wider society. A parallel might be the Holocaust Memorial Day issue, because that was brought about an initiative I took because the Jewish community was very focused on looking inwards, but not engaging the outside world. And Holocaust Memorial Day has achieved that objective in engaging the outside world. So first of all, we're not actually communicating the niceties and message of the Cyprus problem to the wider society. And secondly, a subset of that is that the media, the press, especially those who should know better, are woefully ill-informed about the issue. They approach it, like many issues, on a very superficial level. But even specialist reporters, foreign desk reporters, simply do not know the niceties and detail of the Cyprus problem. And I think one of the issues that we need to try and do is to engage them in a much more detailed exposition about what the issues actually are, so that you don't get this superficial, well, the problem with the Annan plan was the Greek Cypriots voted no, without analysing that in a little bit more detail. The other point I wanted to make briefly with Mr. Kyriakides, Dr. Kyriakides, is this. One of the issues that came out of the last government, I think would follow through this one, is that if there is a settlement, then part of the deal will be releasing the Sovereign Base Area land, in large part to sweeten the pill of any territorial settlement. And the other point you didn't mention at all was Operation Tosca. And after my last visit last year, I was very concerned to hear about the cost of Operation Tosca to the UK taxpayer, and I think that's probably more vulnerable than the Sovereign Base Area, which, as you say, is a real talisman, not just the UK, but of course the US as well, indirectly.
Well, I explore those things to some extent in more detail in the paper. So I'll say it's okay. So, Michael, question.
The question which actually touches what Mr. Tsioupras said about Greek Cypriot, Turkish Cypriot, and what Dr. Issa said about Cypriot identity. Can we draw a distinction between nationality and ethnicity? We have our idea as Cypriots, but when it goes back, we are origin from the Greek nation and Turkish nation. I am in education, and I remember in this country that the educational aim was to assimilate all the ethnic minorities, to make them one of us, English. They failed. And then they came to a new term, to accommodate. So the secret to what both of you said is that as we Greek Cypriots expect other people to respect and appreciate our ethnicity, our beliefs, our religion, the same way we should respect what other people believe. And I think this is what we need to do in Cyprus.
With regard to the tourism industry and the achievements in tourism in Cyprus, the achievements are undoubtedly probably spectacular, to say the least. In 1974, most of the tourist industry was centered around the north of the island, Kyrenia and Famagusta in particular. However, with the Turkish invasion, with those sad days, the tourist industry has almost collapsed. And within 3-4 years, there was tremendous regeneration, tremendous effort by the Cyprus government and by the private industry, I have to say, where they have worked extremely hard and they developed the tourist product. It's probably the savior of Cyprus, I think, the tourist industry, because when you have got 1/3 of the population living in their homes and living in camps, you need work quickly, and that was the best way forward for Cyprus, and congratulations to the government, congratulations to the authorities there for what they have done. Such a variety of product that it's unique, probably, to the whole of the world. So the future of the tourism in Cyprus is bright if we take advantage of what we have, and with the unification of Cyprus, that open museum that is Cyprus today can be enjoyed by thousands more people coming from all over the world.
Claire, I want to say one thing very briefly, then we're going to go to the back.
Very briefly, in connection with Mr. Ekkeshis' question and Mr. Dismal's earlier, one of my arguments is that if British sovereign territory is ceded, either at Nicaea or in Kurian Bay, the hoteliers shouldn't build on that land. Especially Kurian Bay.
We have a question at the back, and then Mr. Stefano after that. At the back, you. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question to, well, say something to Dr. Klearchos as a Kyriakides, yeah. Now, listen very interestingly about your, virtually, you say the virtues of the British bases and, what you have left behind. Now, Britain has left behind. Britain was an empire. Now, it's left behind. It was part of the problem before. And basically, a lot of the problems that we're facing today are by design problems of the past generation of politicians of what they did on our island. They were the ones who invented the word partition. It was Anthony Eden. They were the ones with the Anglo-American policy of trying to impose the Archison plan on us. And the Archison plan was exactly that, dividing the island into two, from north to south. Part of it going to Turkey, the other part going to Greece. So, in view of that, we're saying now, and the reason for that was those bases there. They wanted to protect those bases. And you're saying those bases were there now because it's like a humanitarian base where it's you had the Lebanese, the evacuation from Lebanon. You forget to mention that the bases were used during the Suez crisis. They were very convenient there, and it's very near the oil fields.
Right. So I've written about this extensively. I refer you to my articles, which are listed at the back.
Okay, let me just finish.
Can I just say, though, in 5 minutes, I wanted to say something that addressed the title of the talk. It would have been very easy for me to spend 5 minutes slagging off the British, which is I could have done.
I'm not going
I chose to address the question of the.
Should we not say that?
Accept your point.
The new generation of politicians should acknowledge this and be part of the solution. Just like we're asking Turkey to be part of the solution by acknowledging that they were part of the problem that we now ought to.
So we have another apology now.
Yes, I would like to bring up an issue about the educational system of the two communities. It is right that the two communities have two different educational systems, and according to the Constitution of 1960, each community has its own educational system. I know that a few years ago, under the leadership of Mr. Talat, the Turkish Cypriot community made some changes in the content of the education. I would say progressive changes. I don't know now under the leadership of Mr. Eroglu if this element, yes, I know that they have starting to change again the educational system in the Turkish Cypriot community. I would like to say that as a government we're trying to change the content of the Greek Cypriot community through a large reform of the educational system, without to ignore, of course, the ethnic origins and the history and the traditions of the Greek Cypriot community. Through this reform we try to underline elements like the mutual understanding, the coexistence of different communities in Cyprus, and especially of the Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot communities, to promote the policy of rapprochement between the two communities. And I believe that it's very important because education plays a decisive role in forming the conscience the people and especially of the new generations. I don't know if you have any comments to make on the reforms.
I agree with you, but I would think that the way to change is really to create a new generation of Cypriots that would hold on to. I mean, I do in some way acknowledge Mr. Ekkeshis' points about, you know, what determines me is you know, my nationality, my cultural heritage, and my religion, and so forth. But I think all of that sort of makes up part of us as a society and individuals. What I am saying is that we need to put the cultural identity as Cypriots at the forefront of it. And really, we don't have to look far to see how far we have in common in the language we speak. Example is that I have a Greek Cypriot friend whose English is fairly limited, my Greek is very limited, and yet we are able to talk politics about Cyprus. And we use distinctive Cypriot words to be able to talk and express our emotions and our ideas. What that actually means is that we have 500 or more years of collective coexistence that we've lived together, and the language that has evolved around that and the cultural practices that we have is very much there. What we tend to do in the last 30-35 years is focus on the monolithic aspect of the Turkishness and the Greekness of it, and that's essentially what we need to deviate from and actively put policies into practice where language, the learning of two languages, Greek and Turkish, has to be at the forefront of it.
So we have two brief questions.
What you're saying, and I've been advocating that a long time ago, when it could have been implemented. What are the chances, however, nowadays, with the change in population mix in the occupied area, the vast majority of youngsters being of mainland Turkish origin, what are the chances of this succeeding? In other words, promoting a Cypriot identity in the occupied area, where the vast majority of youngsters, forget your generation and mine, if you look at younger generations, you will find that it will probably be very difficult. It would need a great effort.
Sure, but we need to change the system. We need to move forward by, first of all, changing the policies and practice in schools, and the other is about training our teachers. Training our teachers for a 21st century Cyprus, to create that multicultural. I mean, we also have other minorities in Cyprus. It's not just Turkish and Greek now. So we can place the policies on Turkish and Greek languages at the center of it, and engulf on the actual idea of multiculturalism within a Cypriot context. Once we put that into practice, it can happen.
I'm delighted to hear the emphasis you're putting on the change of education system. But I'm really depressed, and I must use the word depressed to some extent, that in 50 years of existence of the Cyprus Republic, neither the Greek Cypriots nor the Turkish Cypriots have made any effort to introduce the language of the other community in their schools. And this is absolutely fundamental. I'm involved in running some summer schools under the guise of environmental education in the summers in Cyprus. I have been for some time, and I'll probably speak more about this in the next session. The thing that really impresses me every time is bringing, first of all, the teachers together, who are usually extremely suspicious of each other because of the system under which they have been brought up. Within 3 days of a 7 or 14-day course, they're falling over each other. The children, very similarly, the first time those children have seen the devil from the other side, and suddenly they discover that it is not a devil, but it is very, very much like them.
Different devil.
Well,
it's absolutely wonderful what happens with the children. So really what I would say to the leadership of both communities is, for goodness sake, introduce right now the language of the other community in your schools. Now, I know there are major problems with this in finding enough teachers who will be able to teach from the other side, but they should draw the teachers from the other communities. If we can come to a situation where we can help each other and exchange teachers, we can start teaching not only the language but the culture of the other side and discovering how much our culture is similar.
If I may be allowed, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just say 2 words about tourism as well. I hear this word, we have wonderful beaches, time and again was mentioned here today. We really have got to understand, and the tourism organization in Cyprus does understand it, but I don't think they're doing enough yet. The Cyprus is no longer the cheap destination for people from Western Europe to go and soak up the sun. Yes, we have wonderful beaches, so has Turkey at a third of the price, so has Bulgaria, so have a lot of other countries as well. We really need now to concentrate very, very much more on the other benefits which we can offer to people from abroad, specialist tourism. The bird watchers, for example. During the times of bird migration, Cyprus is an absolutely wonderful place from which they can see all these birds which are moving from one continent to the other, walking. We have wonderful scenery. The mountain formations of Cyprus will show the geology to people who enter. I don't want to go on, but really we need to put the emphasis now on conference tourism, on specialist tourism, and offer value rather than just sand and sea.
Thank you very much.
Concluding
remark.
Yes, only one word because I have to leave. About education. Education is not only an issue of language. Of course, language is a very important instrument in order to communicate, but education is language, history, traditions, and the system of principles that we have to formulate to the youngest situation. So we have to approach the educational system with a wider approach, and we try to do this in order to promote the, I can say, the philosophy of coexistence in a common homeland in Cyprus for the youngsters.
Thank you very much. We really do well. No. We can obviously go on in this session. We've already food there, and I think people are desperate for coffee. So thank you. I think our speakers have already opened up the discussion for later on after coffee. So let's break there. Thank you very much to our speakers.
That's great.